welcome back to my channel. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Danielle and I am the owner of Damn Fancy Creations. If y'all are new to my channel, I do want to let you know that you can catch my content in two other places. I have a large tutorial group on Facebook as well as a smaller, more personalized Patreon group where I offer exclusive content, discounts, free digital files, and fun group challenges each month with awesome prizes. If those groups sound like something that would interest you guys, I will drop the links in the description below so y'all can check them out. It is October. I love October. I love Halloween. My birthday is in October. I love all things spooky as long as it's not creepy or scary. So I decided to do a few true crime tumblers. Who does not love binge listening to true crime podcasts while they're working? I know I definitely do. So for these tutorials, I decided to film them for you guys. They're pretty simple, but I have to always keep in mind that sometimes when I think things are super simple to do and just throw something together, other people may need to visually see how it's actually created in order for them to kind of process that information. So even though this tutorial is going to be pretty quick, I am going to show you guys how I add the blood splatters to the tumbler, apply the drips, also apply the water slide, and all of that fun stuff. So even though it is going to be a quick tutorial, I am going to cover a lot of things for you guys to learn. So if you guys are ready to see how I create this fun true crime tumbler, let's get started. Alright guys, so to start out, I have a prepped tumbler spray painted with flat white paint. I have my water slide image, and I have some red paint. This is just Deep Red by Artist Loft. This is a thicker acrylic paint, so I am mixing a little bit with water. If you use a acrylic paint brand such as Folk Art or Craftsmart or other acrylic paints like that, you probably will not need to water it down. This acrylic paint is just super thick. It's typically what I use for paintings and things like that, but I really liked this color red. So I am just mixing it with my paintbrush. You want the consistency to be a little liquidy but not watery, because you don't want your blood splatters to be too transparent, but you don't want huge thick globs of paint just on your tumbler. And the paintbrush I'm using is a pretty stiff bristle brush. And I am just getting just a little bit of paint on this paintbrush. I kind of wiped it off a little bit. And I am just going to flick it on the tumbler. You definitely want to put paper down. If I was not filming this, I would have for sure done this outside, but it's kind of hard to film this and hold the tumbler correctly, so I just went with whatever worked. And I am kind of, you know, pulling the paintbrush back at different angles. That way you will get a different splatter pattern versus the same pattern all over the cup. For this one, I did kind of stand it up a little bit. And definitely get your bottom as well. You don't want your bottom to be left out. And the coarser your brush is, the better the splatters will be. If you use too soft of a brush, then you're not going to get that good splatter pattern. So you're basically just going to do this until you're happy with your splatters, and then we'll move on to the water slide. I did end up switching my image. I thought that this size went better with this size tumbler. I will point out a few things. First, I did not epoxy my tumbler. I just sprayed it with a glossy clear Rustoleum spray, and my water slide is also sealed with the Rustoleum clear spray. For my water slides, I just take a wet paper towel and wet the backing of it. There's no need to submerge it in water, leave it in a tub of water. I just wet the backing, set it aside for about 30 seconds, and then it is ready to apply to my cup. You can also see that I went back and added some bloody fingerprints to the tumbler. And I'm going to be using nice and thick ruby red and regular artist resin to make my drips. I am just going to go ahead and apply my water slide before I do my drips. This is typically how I do all of my water slides and drips. That way I know where to place my drips. So you're basically just going to slide the water slide onto your tumbler and just maneuver it around slightly until you get it centered or however you want it on your tumbler. Once you get it situated how you want, I will take my microfiber cloth and I will hold the top and slide the water out from the middle outward. I do this very lightly at first just to get the majority of the water out. I don't want my slide moving around the tumbler, so I just am very lightly squeezing the water out from underneath the image. And once you think you have the water out, I go back with a little bit more pressure and just make sure that the slide is laying flat. There are no creases, no little air bubbles or water bubbles that are trapped underneath the slide. And since I sprayed my tumbler with a glossy clear spray paint, you are not going to be able to see the seams. I know that's a question that several of you guys have. Do you have to epoxy before you apply your water slide? The answer is no. As long as your tumbler is smooth and doesn't have a whole lot of sand marks, I just spray it with clear glossy spray and then I apply my water slide. So right now I am just mixing part A and B of regular artist resin from CCDIY. And we are just mixing it up. I prefer a popsicle stick only because I like the thickness of it. These are actually the thicker craft sticks, the jumbo ones, I believe. I just personally do not feel like my epoxy gets mixed well enough if I use these smaller stirrers. And any bubbles that I may have in my epoxy are taken care of with the CCDIY torch. And when I mix epoxy, I don't necessarily mix for a certain amount of time. I just mix until I do not see any striations in the epoxy. If your epoxy is not mixed well, it may almost look a little bit like oil is in there. You can definitely see the different parts, but if your epoxy is mixed well, you will not be able to see any type of swirls or cloudiness or anything like that. And I am mixing enough for 2 cups right now. If you are just doing 1 cup, you probably only need about 15 milliliters, depending on how long you want your drips to go. And I am just adding 1 or 2 drops of this ruby red dispersion color. I really like using dispersion colors or micas for drips because you really do not need a lot at all. 1 or 2 drops is all you need and the color is amazing. Now keep in mind that if you do use a thickening product like Nice and Thick, it could change the color of your mixture. Since Nice and Thick is white, it can appear a little cloudy, so you may need to add a little bit more colorant after you get everything mixed how you want, just to bring back that color that you want. Your other option is to set your Nice and Thick aside, or sorry, your epoxy aside for 30-45 minutes and let it thicken up on its own. I do suggest stirring every 10 to 15 minutes so your epoxy does not start to react and flash cure, because that can happen even if you're using artist resin. I had to go grab another popsicle stick so I could start to put my Nice and Thick into my epoxy mixture. And I did get a larger cup, I believe. When I am adding Nice and Thick, I do prefer to mix everything in a larger container that is much larger than a medicine cup. That way you can stir and stir and stir. You can smush the epoxy against the side, and you're not going to have to worry about keeping it all in this tiny container. So I am just splitting up my mixture right now because I am saving this for my second cup. So I don't want all of it to get thick at the same time. I still want to have time to work with my other one. So with Nice and Thick, you're just going to add a little bit at a time. That way you can make sure everything is mixed up well. I usually will bring my popsicle stick against the side and just kind of smush out any lumps that I see. And if you guys have never used Nice and Thick, maybe you guys have just seen tutorials of people using it, I know it can look like you are using a lot of this product just for one cup, but it is so fluffy that it really is not a lot that you're using. I can take this container, shake it back up, and it will look like I hardly used any at all. So I just kind of take a look at my mixture, make sure that there are no more clumps, and then I will add some more Nice and Thick. I did decide to add a little bit more to this mixture just because this cup was a little fatter than the skinny that I'm doing. So when I first add a decent amount of Nice and Thick, I kind of just punch it down into the epoxy. If you start stirring quickly right off the bat, some of the particles can go airborne, and you definitely do not want to breathe this stuff in. It definitely has a consistency like powdered sugar, so if you breathe on it the wrong way, it will go everywhere. So again, we are just smushing this against the side. And you guys can see already how my color is starting to change a little bit. It is a little bit more of a lighter red versus what is in the smaller medicine cup. So I believe I did go back and add another drop or two of the dispersion color, but again, you would, it's better to do this after you add the Nice and Thick, because you don't want to add too much color before you add the Nice and Thick and then it not be the color that you want. So 1 or 2 extra drops after you add your Nice and Thick will correct that color. So here's what my epoxy looks like after I've added several little scoops of Nice and Thick and mixed everything in. I like to test my drips on the side of my mixing cup, and I prefer my drips not moving at all. I like to have complete control over my drips, how far I allow them to fall, how well they stay on the top rim. I don't like them liquidy at all. So I decided to add some leopard print spots to this tumbler. The true crime image that you can get on my site, thedrunkflamingo.com, it has a leopard print background, so I figured why not add some gold leopard spots. These little tweezers I find super handy to pick up little things like this. I did get them from CCDIY as well. So I am just adding some kind of sporadically around the tumbler, and then I will add my drips. So you guys can see that we have basically completed this entire tumbler without any epoxy coats so far. All we did was spray paint, add the paint splatters, spray clear gloss spray, apply our water slide, and now we are applying our leopard spots. So after I get my drips on and those have cured, I will apply one coat of epoxy, then I will sand the top rim to reveal some of the stainless, and then I will apply one more coat of epoxy. I will probably do 2 more. I do not let my tumblers go out the door without at least 3 coats of epoxy. I just want to be sure that there is enough epoxy on there. It's not going to be too thin or crack if a customer accidentally drops it or bumps it into something. And I do try to add some fun little things to the bottom too. So we are going to add some leopard spots here as well. And once I get all the leopard spots on, I am ready to start applying my drips. So you guys can see how thick this epoxy is. And y'all can see that it is pretty dark now. I did go back and add another drop or 2 of the dispersion color just to help get that dark red creepy color that I wanted. Nothing like fake blood dripping down your cups. Birdie is barking at some dogs. So I basically just apply a thin line of epoxy all the way around the cup just to get that starting point. And then wherever I start to see drips naturally forming, I will take a small bead of epoxy and kind of just apply it to the edge of the tumbler. I know I'm a little bit out of frame here. Ugh. And the larger your beads of epoxy you apply to the edge, the further down your drips are going to drip. If you apply just a small bead of epoxy, it will more than likely stay closer to the top if your epoxy is pretty thick like mine. If your epoxy is still pretty watery or runny, it is going to drip down the tumbler regardless of how much you apply. So I will just do this all the way around the tumbler. Adding one bead of epoxy at a time. I will also typically get my torch and kind of hit the drips with my torch just to pop any air bubbles that may be trapped in there. This also will help to kind of smooth out the finish of the drips so they're more smooth. And if you heat your drips, it can also help them kind of drip down the tumbler a little more if that's the look you're going for. Since this was a shorty tumbler, I just wanted them to stay kind of close to the top. And that is pretty much it for this tutorial. This is what the finished tumbler looks like after 3 coats of epoxy. I think it turned out super cute. I love true crime and leopard print, so this was right up my alley. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and are able to draw inspiration to create your own true crime tumbler. If y'all enjoyed this tutorial or learned something new, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to catch the next video coming up that was picked just for you. As always, if you're looking for more tips, tricks, or tutorials, be sure to check out my tutorial group on Facebook or my Patreon group. Both are linked in the description. Thanks for watching.